LCSC students of African history, welcome to week 3. Let's talk about what's going on this week, shall we? All right. So, by the time you see this, I may have reorganized it a little bit. Um, the first thing I want you to do is the 4th episode of the Basil Davidson series. Okay? Um, and this is really looking at the political and social structures of medieval West Africa. The discussion is the same. All right. How's the episode support the overall thesis for the series? What's the sub-thesis for this particular episode? The historical examples. You guys get the idea. If your last name begins with the letters Q through Z, you're responsible for getting this discussion moving. It needs to be moving by January 30th. It needs to be followed up by Thursday, February 1st. You need to demonstrate to me you engaged with the videos. You made an effort to be actively engaged, not just passively, oh, I watched them. You took notes and you learned something from them. These are supposed to be replacing whatever kind of lecture you might get from me. This is kind of how we're structuring the class, right? Everyone is encouraged to engage, and if your last name does not start with the letters Q through Z, you do not have to wait for those folks to get something moving. Put it up. There's plenty to talk about. I thought about having everybody required every single week. If you think you might want some extra credit at some point, engage, right? I'd love to see the entire class engaged on these discussions the entire time. So, that's our next video, or our next discussion on these videos. And then things get a little bit messy, right? So, I bet you can deal with it. So let's talk about the messiness, because you got a couple of other assignments that hopefully are not a surprise to you, because I've been trying to explain them to you since the very first day of class that they were coming up. One, do a little digital recon on Ibn Battuta. Who was he? And why are his accounts considered noteworthy by historians? Now, on the one hand, the book that I assigned is going to give you a lot of this information, particularly the introduction to the book by Ross Dunn. Don't skip out on that introduction, or you're not going to really understand who this dude is. Or the foreword, I mean. And then also by the introduction to the author, by the authors, again, don't skip out on it. It provides a lot of context, because once you get into the primary sources, if you try to cut corners, and I'm not going to read the introduction, I'm not going to read the foreword, I'm just going to restart reading the primary source. Yeah, all right, you're just going to start reading the primary source written by a North African traveler about West Africa during the medieval period, and then you should not be surprised if you're confused, right? The introduction and the foreword will help you with that. So don't skip out on that stuff. But also, take this virtual tour of Ibn Battuta's Travelers out of Berkeley. Pretty cool. Just kind of, you don't have to read all this stuff in lots of detail, because there's lots of it. But sort of scan it, get an idea about who this dude is and the places that he goes, and how the West African travels connect into all this. And we can come back to some of this. I'm just trying to set you guys up. All right, next. Now, There's a couple of different things going on in terms of the Ibn Battuta book. And I'll tell you what the spirit of it is. And then we can figure out how to deal with it as far as this class goes. Again, this is one of the assignments that I struggled with developing the conversion from the face-to-face class to the online class. So we're kind of doing it here. Okay, so let's just talk about the primary source analysis of the Ibn Battuta book. It's classic. It is a classic primary source. Medieval historians of any flavor, African historians, are very familiar with this book. Basil Davidson brings up Ibn Battuta in that Caravans of Gold episode. In the Cities and Kings episode, he's in the area that Ibn Battuta was in. So there's a lot of crossover between the Basil Davidson videos and what's happening in the Ibn Battuta book, right? So what I want you to do is write a 3 to 4 page, this is a formal essay, all right? You should be juniors and seniors and know what that means. That describes one of the following characteristics: culture, economics, politics, or social of medieval West Africa, right? So what I want you to do with this is we're practicing taking information out of a primary source. We're doing data analysis, right? So what y'all are going to do is you're going to take the primary source, and as you're reading it, you're going to be taking notes. And you don't necessarily have to pick right off the bat what your essay is going to be about, but you'd be smart to sort of write off in your notes, oh, here are some ideas about culture, here are some ideas about politics, here are some ideas about the economy of the region. And so what I want you to do is to write a 750 word minimum, 1,000 word maximum, or you can do 3 to 4 pages. You know, you can, whichever's to your advantage there, right? And describe one of those characteristics. What does the economy of West Africa look like during the medieval period, according to Ibn Battuta? Where does he seem to get it right? Where does he seem to get it wrong? Now, you're really only going to have the Basil Davidson videos to kind of measure that against, but you can do that. How do you account for the author's biases in your readings? Ibn Battuta, he's not familiar with what's going on in West Africa. And he's got some issues. And he's got some issues with the way they practice Islam as well. And so how do you account for some of this? So how do you get data out of a source from an author who may be inserting a little bit of judgment into the data, right? How does it connect to the Davidson videos? And what's the sort of glimpse we get from this primary source from medieval Africa? Now, if you got some other kind of angle you want to do with this, if you've got some kind of issue in particular that you're interested in and it strikes you that there's material in here, just holler at me. I am open to all kinds of ideas, but I don't like surprises, and this assignment works in other classes. Don't forget to read the appendixes, which are pretty cool. Appendix 1 gives us information from Ibn Khaldun and al-Makari. For those of y'all who had me for History 101, you may remember those two scholars in particular. They're Muslim scholars who also wrote very important accounts of the Crusades as well as the Black Plague in North Africa. They are around about the same time, so you can use those to corroborate or not corroborate some of Ibn Battuta's accounts. Appendix 2 is really about East Africa, but it's still kind of cool because they're looking at some of the role of dances. Take a look at it. Okay, now here's the deal. In my face-to-face classes, the assignment would be do this, come to class with your paper written, and we're going to spend an hour and 15 minutes discussing it, and then we're going to declare victory. So I'm kind of struggling over how to do that for this class. So here's what we're going to do. You guys are going to write this paper, and it's going to be brilliant. And it's due whenever I said it was due, February 3rd, I think. And then there's a discussion that's connected with this paper. Part of the discussion is optional, and part of it is required. Okay? Let's talk about the required part. This is the grand conclusion part. I'll talk about it in a second. And then here's the optional part. Reply, optional, optional. You can read that as extra credit if you want. The professor loves to see people that are engaged in talking about history. And if I haven't made it clear to you by now, the most important thing to me is that you engage with the sources and the materials in this class and make an effort to discuss them with your colleagues. If you demonstrate that on the discussion boards, if you leave no doubt in my mind, you read the material, you watched the videos, you made an effort to talk about it and discuss it, you give me a lot to work with, right? When it comes time for final grades. Hint, hint. All right. The required portion goes something along the lines of, now that you've written your essay, right? So this is the grand conclusions at the end. Talk about it. Let's call it 100 words. It's not against the law to use some stuff straight out of your essay. I don't want just like little snippets and clips, but you guys wrote those essays to talk about. But a few things you might talk about. Did you enjoy the reading and explain? I just don't want to hear, no, I didn't like it. Well, why not? What are the values and limitations of using this kind of source for learning history? What are the pros and cons of a historical source having a personality, right? Ibn Battuta's got a personality. How do you take that into account as a source? What was surprising for you to learn about medieval Africa? What's the best example that you pulled about whatever your characteristic was? How do you connect the material to the Davidson videos? You guys get the idea. I just want you to read the book, to develop an essay on a cultural, economic, political, or social element, and come here and talk about it. I would like this part of the discussion not to be the equivalent of every student, essentially posting their paper up or like stuff for me to read. It's supposed to be a discussion for all of y'all. Okay? That's the deal. That's the required part. Now let's talk about the optional part. Not even really certain the best way to organize the optional part, but I did it this way. Okay? And the optional part you can get started on today if you want to. whatever day you're watching this, even if you're watching this before the class has even started. You can get started on this today because it's the place where you discuss the book as you go. Ask questions about the assignments. Talk about, hey, in the introduction, Ross Dunn says this. Did anyone else see this? Hey, Ibn Battuta talks about this example. Did anybody else think this was odd? Hey, I'm working on my paper. I wanted to use, economic examples. I've got this one and this one. How are you guys thinking about it? You guys get the idea? This is where the discussion along the way should happen. It's optional. You guys answer each other's questions. I thought about subdividing it even further into here's the cultural stuff, here's the economic stuff, here's the social stuff. If you guys really want to do that, I suppose you can do it yourselves. I wasn't really sure, so I left it like this. I kind of think the optional discussion is going to be messy, but I also think it's a really great place for you guys to talk about the readings as you go, because with this particular class format, we don't really have a scene where we are checking in with each other a couple of times a week. Hey, how's the reading going? What are you guys having struggles with? In the past, it's gone a couple of different ways. I've taught this class where people didn't really have anything to say about the book before the day the essay was due. It's going great, enjoying the book, I understand it, no worries. Fine. It's awesome. I've taught it other ways where, hey, what are you guys, thinking about this book? Hey, I'm not really quite understanding how I'm supposed to do this. Okay, let's talk about that for 5 or 10 minutes. This is where we're doing that. All right? The book's fun. The book is shorter than it even looks. Okay, but you still start dealing with it. All right. And I think that should give you everything you need to know to get rolling with the stuff for week 3. All right. Don't forget that this source is going to be used for your final essay. So work with it. Spend some time getting good notes now. Spend some time with it now so that you don't have to go back and reread things. Also, week 4 and week 5, which I haven't got entirely set up yet, we are going to deal with the Epic of Sundiata, which happens roughly 100 years before Ibn Battuta goes through Mali. And I use them in reverse order for a reason, because Ibn Battuta is a little more straightforward about what he sees, and it's a little easier to kind of get a visualization about what medieval West Africa may have looked like when we get into the Sundiata tale. But my point is that for week 5, your written assignment is going to be mainly focused on the Epic of Sundiata, but it's going to be bringing in Ibn Battuta into it. And then we'll continue to add things, and we'll revisit it at the end of the semester. So take good notes. All right. So again, you got any questions, reach out. Zoom office hours, Canvas inbox. I'm always happy to help. Happy to get people connected, make sure we all know what's going on. Enjoy your historical studies, and I will talk with you soon.